It went out on X.
Formerly Twitter, yeah.
Right, and it was published in the middle of the night.
Which is wild.
And the subject of this urgent, highly detailed medical update was not a politician with their finger on the button. It was a monkey named Punch.
A resident primate at the Ichikawa City Zoo in Japan. And he was dealing with a medical situation that falls significantly short of life-threatening.
I mean, calling it short of life-threatening is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
Oh, for sure.
We're talking about a microscopic scratch on a single toe.
Barely visible.
Right. But this tiny, virtually invisible scratch drew an audience of over 250,000 people.
Which is just a staggering number for this.
To be precise, 269,100 views.
Well,
thousands of people anxiously tuning in, sharing, and reacting in the dead of night to a localized, fundamentally painless microinjury.
it's a textbook case, really. It's a micro event being fed into a digital ecosystem and just coming out the other side is this huge macro narrative.
And that phenomenon is exactly our mission for this deep dive. You, our listener, shared a fascinating stack of sources with us for this one.
Yeah, really great finds.
We've got a brief overview establishing our main subject, Punch the monkey, alongside this incredibly detailed, clinically precise official post from the Ichikawa City Zoo, dated July 30th, 2026.
Right.
And our goal today is to figure out the mechanics behind this. We need to understand how a totally routine animal care update became a massive digital moment.
And what it reveals about the unseen gears of modern zookeeping.
Yes, and ultimately what it exposes about our own psychological need to forge these parasocial relationships with captive animals.
Because the reaction data tells a story about human behavior, right?
Right.
Punch just happens to be the canvas we are projecting it onto.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to ground ourselves in the physical reality of the incident itself before we analyze the public's massive reaction. Because, I mean, the sheer level of detail in this official zoo post is staggering.
Oh, it's intense.
The zoo did not just log on to X and say, hey, everyone, Punch hurt his foot.
No, they went way further.
They reported the exact topographical coordinates of the injury. They stated they confirmed a small scratch near the first joint of the ring finger on Punch's right foot.
Right foot, ring finger, first joint. I mean, the phrasing literally mimics an orthopedic surgical report.
Right. I read that sentence and my mind went straight back to the NFL injury reports.
Oh, totally.
The ones where a team is forced by league rules to disclose every single microscopic sprain to the media. Like, oh, the wide receiver has a grade 1 sprain on the distal interphalangeal joint.
Yep, it's that exact tone.
So my immediate theory when reading this Zoo post was defensive PR.
That makes sense.
Right. I'm guessing zoos today are terrified of visitor backlash. They must operate under this constant threat of someone taking a blurry iPhone photo of a monkey's foot and starting a viral rumor about animal neglect.
Well, what's fascinating here is that while defensive PR is absolutely part of the equation, this level of transparency is actually deeply rooted in zoological science.
Wait, really? How so?
Yeah, it ties back to animal biology. If we look at the mechanics of wildlife management, wild animals, especially primates, they are evolutionarily programmed to mask weakness.
Because showing weakness is dangerous.
Exactly. In a natural habitat, showcasing an injury is essentially painting a target on your own back.
Right, yeah.
It tells predators you are slow, and it tells your troop members you're vulnerable to a challenge in the social hierarchy.
So an injured animal will actively pretend it isn't injured just to survive the day.
100%. They will walk normally on a sprained ankle until the pain is just catastrophic.
Wow.
So for the zoo staff to notice a tiny scratch near the first joint of a specific toe before the animal even shows a limp.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, it represents a triumph over millions of years of evolutionary camouflage.
That is wild to think about.
By broadcasting those exact coordinates, the zoo is proving to the public that their observation protocols are just razor sharp.
Right.
It's a demonstration of institutional competence. They're telling their audience, like, our vigilance is so high that nothing escapes our notice.
Okay, so it's an institutional flex disguised as a medical update.
Exactly.
It's the zoo saying, look at the caliber of professionals we have on staff.
And it's a flex that they immediately back up with action. The post meticulously details their medical response, too.
Right. They explicitly state that a veterinarian was brought in to treat the scratch with disinfection.
Which is key. They didn't just have a zookeeper wipe it with a damp cloth. They deployed specialized medical personnel.
Which feels like a massive escalation. I mean, if I get a tiny scratch on my knuckle while making dinner, I might run it under the tap if I'm feeling particularly cautious.
Sure.
I'm certainly not calling a specialist to my kitchen.
Well, no, of course not.
My guess is the zoo is trying to control the timeline of information here. By deploying the vet for a scratch, they dictate the entire narrative from discovery to resolution in one fell swoop.
They are acting as their own breaking news outlet.
Mm-hmm.
You touched on the fear of visitor backlash earlier, and that is a very real threat vector for modern zoological parks.
Right, the internet loves outrage.
The internet ecosystem thrives on outrage, particularly when it comes to animal welfare. If a visitor spots a speck of blood on Punch's toe before the zoo announces it, that visitor controls the narrative.
Oh, absolutely. And then the zoo is playing catch-up.
The zoo would be forced into a defensive posture, issuing all these reactive statements just to prove they aren't neglectful.
And by the time the zoo issues a correction, the viral outrage has already circled the globe.
Exactly. By getting out ahead of the story with clinical precision and immediate medical intervention, they amputate the possibility of a scandal.
They shut it down completely.
They establish themselves as the ultimate, unassailable authority on Punch's well-being.
Okay, that makes the strategy crystal clear. The detail isn't an accident, it's a shield. But looking at that shield brings us to a very specific phrase in the medical report that stopped me in my tracks.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
We need to move from the injury itself to a very strange negative detail the zoo chose to include.
You're referring to the not a bite clause.
Yes. The veterinarian's official opinion, translated from the Japanese text, was that the wound is shallow and is explicitly not caused by a bite wound.
Yeah?
Now, I have to challenge this strategy.
Okay, go for it.
Why introduce the concept of a bite at all? If I get a paper cut at the office, I don't walk into the break room and announce, "Hey guys, just an update on my finger, not a shark attack," in case you were wondering.
That's a great point.
Why put a violent scenario into the public's imagination if it didn't even happen? My first thought was liability. Are they worried about being sued by an animal rights group if the monkeys are fighting?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it has very little to do with human legal liability and literally everything to do with primate sociology.
Oh, really? Sociology.
Yes. A primate enclosure is not just a physical space containing animals. It is a highly complex, fiercely political social structure.
Okay.
Within a monkey troop, a bite is never just a clumsy accident. It is a deliberate act of communication.
It's a political statement.
Exactly. A bite is a coup d'etat.
Wow.
It signifies a complete breakdown in the established order. It means there is aggression, bullying, or, a violent challenge for dominance and resources.
And people online actually track that.
Oh, absolutely. Consider the audience reading this zoo update. The people who follow the Ichikawa City Zoo on X aren't just casual observers.
They're super fans.
They are dedicated fans who treat the primate enclosure like a long-running television drama. They know the hierarchy. They know who the alpha is, who the instigators are, and exactly where Punch sits in that social web.
So if the zoo just reported a wound, the fans would immediately assume the worst about the troop's stability.
Oh, the zoo switchboard would light up. The replies on X would be flooded with conspiracy theories.
Like, who bit Punch? Is the enclosure too small?
Exactly. Are they stressed? Do they need to be separated? The anxiety would spiral instantly.
I see.
The veterinarian who examined Punch wasn't just diagnosing a physical scratch on a toe. They were diagnosing the potential psychological reaction of the zoo's most ardent followers.
That is brilliant. By ruling out a bite, they are essentially issuing a diplomatic press release assuring the public that the monkey kingdom remains at peace.
It dismantles the anxiety before it can even form a root system.
Yeah.
It proves the zoo possesses this incredibly sophisticated understanding of their digital audience. They know exactly what triggers their followers' fears regarding animal welfare, and they're proactively neutralizing those triggers.
Okay, so we have this incredibly airtight strategic messaging from the zoo. They provide GPS-level coordinates of the toe, they deploy the vet to control the timeline, and they assure the superfans that no monkey-on-monkey violence has occurred.
Yep. It's a masterclass in PR.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We have to look at the massive, completely disproportionate digital reaction to this clinical update.
Right, because the viral metrics elevate this from a clever PR strategy into a genuine sociological phenomenon.
Let's establish Punch's actual physical reality first.
Okay.
The post specifically notes that Punch is showing absolutely no signs of pain, no signs of fear, and is acting completely like his usual self.
Right.
The zoo states they will continue observation, but the patient doesn't even know he's a patient.
He is totally oblivious. He's simply going about his daily routine, unbothered by this microscopic scratch on his toe.
It feels exactly like a toddler running through the park who scrapes their knee on a branch.
Oh, for sure.
The kid doesn't feel it, doesn't notice the blood, and just keeps running toward the swings. But in this scenario, the parents have called a press conference, hired a marching band, and are throwing a ticker tape parade for the child's bravery.
That's a perfect analogy.
Because the numbers on this post are staggering. This update went live at 12:30 a.m. on July 30, 2026.
Midnight.
Right. And it pulled in 269,100 views.
More than 250,000 people engaging with an oblivious monkey's painless scratch while the rest of the world is asleep.
And they weren't just passively scrolling past it. The official account closed out this incredibly clinical medical bulletin with 2 highly emotional hashtags.
The tonal shift there is wild.
In Japanese, they used hashtag Ganbare Punch and hashtag Ganbataroon Punch.
That's right.
For our listeners, that translates to hashtag Hang in There Punch and hashtag You're Doing Great Punch.
Yeah.
But hang in there from what? He doesn't feel anything.
Exactly.
My question is, how does this engine actually work? What is fueling this massive outpouring of emotion for a literal non-event?
Well, to understand the mechanics of what we might call a digital empathy engine, we have to look at both the fuel and the gears.
Okay, what's the fuel?
The fuel is the cognitive load of modern life. Think about the specific timing.
Yeah.
12:30 a.m. Who was scrolling on X at midnight? It's insomniacs, night shift workers, people dealing with anxiety, people who were just doom scrolling through a feed, typically filled with, geopolitical crises, economic instability, and deeply entrenched human conflict.
They're exhausted by problems that feel entirely unsolvable.
Yes, the human brain is fatigued by the sheer scale of modern news. And then suddenly, injected into that feed of heavy, unsolvable trauma is a tiny, perfectly contained crisis.
A monkey has a scratch.
A monkey has a scratch.
A crisis that comes pre-solved by the time you even read about it.
That is the crucial gear in the engine. The narrative loop is closed instantaneously.
Yeah.
The wound is small, it's been disinfected, it wasn't a bite, and Punch is doing great. It offers the audience a rare, concentrated hit of catharsis.
Because there's an actual resolution.
Right. We have a deep psychological drive, fueled by anthropomorphism, to project human struggles and narratives onto animals. When the zoo deploys hashtags like Hang in There Punch, they abandon the clinical tone of the veterinarian and step right into the role of a storyteller.
They're inviting the audience to treat a random biological occurrence as this, heroic journey.
Yes.
They're formatting the data so the algorithm can push emotional resonance rather than just medical facts.
And the algorithm favors engagement. And nothing drives engagement like shared empathy. The audience enthusiastically accepts the invitation to anthropomorphize Punch because, honestly, it feels good.
It's an easy win.
You can feel a brief, manageable surge of concern for a vulnerable creature, immediately receive the dopamine hit of knowing professionals have saved the day, and then join a massive community of strangers cheering him on.
It's psychological relief disguised as animal welfare.
Perfectly said.
We get the emotional satisfaction of caring for a victim without having to process the heavy, lasting stakes of a real tragedy.
Which brings us to the core of parasocial relationships in the digital age. This raises an important question about how asymmetrical these relationships are.
What do you mean by asymmetrical?
Well, the audience feels a deep, intimate, emotionally taxing connection to a figure who has no idea they exist.
Oh, right.
Punch doesn't know what the internet is. He doesn't know what a hashtag is. He is entirely unaware that 269,000 people are deeply invested in the first joint of his right ring finger.
But the people clicking like and sharing that post at 1 a.m. are genuinely comforted by him, though. The monkey is just a vessel for them to safely offload their own ambient anxiety.
The micro event becomes a safe container for our macro emotions.
Wow.
The zoo meticulously builds the container with their hyper-specific medical updates, proving the environment is safe and controlled.
Right.
The algorithm distributes the container to people desperate for a low-stakes distraction. And then the internet just fills that container with projected empathy.
When you break it down like that, the absurdity of the situation almost strips away.
It really does.
It reveals this deeply human, somewhat vulnerable desire to protect something innocent, even if our efforts are completely invisible to the thing we're trying to protect.
It is a digital village organizing a massive, coordinated effort to raise a monkey. Or, at the very least, a digital village finding solidarity in cheering on his right toe.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive with a source that frankly seemed comical on its surface, right? A 12:30 a.m. dispatch detailing the disinfection of a single joint on a monkey's foot.
Yeah, tiny, tiny detail.
But as we've taken it apart, this singular post perfectly illustrates a bizarre modern intersection. On one side, you have the hyper-vigilant reality of modern veterinary science, where an animal sanctuary has to operate with the precision of a top-tier hospital just to overcome a wild animal's evolutionary instinct to hide its pain.
Absolutely.
On another side, you have the strategic brilliance of digital PR, where ruling out a primate bite is actually a masterclass in crowd psychology.
Managing the fans.
Exactly. And finally, you have this deeply invested internet fandom where 250,000 people gather in the middle of the night to project their own exhaustion and empathy onto an animal who is just happily going about his day.
It is a remarkably complex ecosystem of information, biology, and emotion, all disguised as a simple post on X.
It takes the traditional passive zoo experience, where you buy a ticket, look through some glass, and walk away, and transforms it into a 247 highly active digital community of caretakers.
This transformation leaves us with a really fascinating dynamic to consider.
Yeah.
And for you listening, I want to leave you with this thought to explore on your own.
Okay.
We began this discussion by comparing the zoo's post to a high-stakes medical bulletin, the kind of broadcast designed to inform the public about a serious, necessary intervention.
Right, like the press conference.
But as we've seen, this specific intervention was microscopic, the patient felt literally no pain, and the true crisis was entirely manufactured by human perception.
So true.
So if an official zoo account can mobilize over 250,000 views, engineer algorithmic engagement, and generate these deeply emotional hashtags for a totally painless scratch on a monkey's toe,
Are these hyper-specific medical bulletins actually serving the animal's welfare? Or have these updates quietly evolved into a psychological tool, a daily, carefully managed emotional release valve designed to soothe the anxieties of a human audience who desperately needs to feel connected to a solvable problem through the safety of their screens?